Private equity isn't just about buying businesses, it's about transforming them. And in field services, that transformation drives big exits, with nearly half of all value creation now coming from operational improvement. PE firms are relying more and more on operating partners to fix labor bottlenecks, scale service delivery, and drive EBITDA growth. And Rick LeBlanc has spent years inside PE-backed service businesses, helping them optimize margins, streamline operations, and unlock real value. And he's got the war stories to prove it. So today, we're going to be breaking down how great operating partners drive growth, strengthen leadership, and maximize enterprise value in field services. I'm Yassin Shaar, CEO of Origo BPO, joined by my co-host Gyner Ozgul, CEO of RaftrX, who's worked firsthand with operating partners in scaling service businesses. Rick, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Gyner and I have been definitely looking forward to this. So Rick, before we get into the weeds, why don't you give us, 1 minute background about your experience in private equity?
Well, I've been running companies for quite a long time, private startup companies. Some were venture backed, some were private equity backed. I've also run big divisions of global corporations. And then I had an opportunity to become an operating partner at Huron Capital. And we do consolidation of facility services companies. We do merger and acquisition of independent private service firms, whether it be mechanical contractors, electrical service companies, building automation companies, fire alarm companies. So some good experience with that. And I've been there 12 years.
Brilliant. Well, so why don't we start then with the big picture? Rick, in your extensive experience, like what separates a great operating partner from one that just adds complexity?
Well, some private equity firms recognize that it's important to have river guides, if you like, for a specific industry. A lot of private equity firms know how to do the financial engineering, how to raise funds, how to organize equity and debt. But the operating partners are people who come with deep industry experience in a particular sector. And that helps because all businesses are different, and the key operating metrics, key performance metrics are different in different industries. And that's where an operating partner can bring real world experience.
No, brilliant. I mean, Gyner, you've worked with operating partners, before, and from your experience, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Rick here shared, and like what makes the difference between one that truly drives impact and one that just adds noise and, maybe create unnecessary tension in the boardroom.
Yeah, I think it's where the balance of recognizing where the management team has the experience in the business and where they need help in terms of growth, and also the transition of moving from kind of an independent business or a corporate-backed business, depending. Some of them are corporate carve-outs, some of them are entrepreneurial businesses that move into private equity, and they don't understand that transition, right? There are things that are very, very different in the way you account for things, just different in the way you get audited, just different in the way you plan and forecast your business. All those are new items, right? So the management team may be really good at the core business running the service events, making sure calls get closed and invoiced and all. But the kind of the peripherals around that of running a business at scale is where they struggle. And the best operating partners start to recognize and say, okay, how can I help you get that skill and get up to speed so that you can continue to focus on running the business, but also understand there's new competencies you have to learn.
And so Rick, I mean, you've worked with dozens of PE-backed field service companies, Gyner said, what are some of the common, blind spots you see companies, before they get acquired or as they're scaling, like Gyner is saying, what have you seen in your experience, and where really an operating partner can add value and support someone like Gyner in his role. And a lot of times, you've got a new CEO every 3 to 5 years. How does that onboarding, happen, and how do you, support that, the executive or C-suite and seeing around their blind spots? And I know you've got a few war stories there to share.
Well, I totally agree with Gyner that a lot of these operators did very well building a nice business. Maybe they got the business to 10 million or 20 million in revenue, and that's great, and that's why the private equity firm wanted to buy the business. But they haven't had the experience to scale it to 50 million or 100 million. And what got you here doesn't get you there, as the saying is. And what an operating partner can do is if they've got that experience, they can say, well, things are different once you acquire 5 or 6 of these small to medium-sized businesses and you try to scale it into a larger enterprise. You need different processes, you need different systems, you need different individuals, and you have to invest in that. You have to invest in hiring the right people and putting the systems in place. And a lot of these independent private operators just haven't had that experience.
Yeah.
They're valuable assets to the organization going forward, but they may not have that experience. So an operating partner with the right background can really help in that regard.
Yeah, I totally agree with the way Rick views that. The other thing that's been helpful for me is the whole idea of like organizational structure as it scales a little bit, because you lose a sense of what's needed. So this organization just went from 50 million to 100 million to 200 million, right? What you needed at 50 million is materially different than what you need at 200, right? And all of a sudden, folks like Rick can come in and say, okay, you're at 200 million now. You have a good kind of process flow, as an example, in national accounts. You're going to need someone to maintain that, or you're going to need an infrastructure to visit and provide QBRs to those folks. Like there's all this like work that you don't know exists in a new kind of part of your business you hadn't thought about.
Okay, well, so and how do you overcome that, right? So like, I mean, you've both been in the trenches in post, acquisition integration. Like, what did you see like the most common resistance you see from founders and leadership teams in general when an operating partner comes in and it's like, hey, let me show you the ropes a little bit so you can get up and running and create more value?
Well, let me I'll take it. I'll give you my view of that. A lot of these independent operators and owners, like I say, they've built a good business and it's become a sizable business, $10, $20 million, whatever. But they've never really seen the inside of another business like that in a different market. They've never really seen a high performer. And
how do you define high performer, Rick?
Someone that has very high customer retention, someone who has very high employee retention,
technicians.
Yes, and of course the financial metrics. So the financial metrics become important. The key performance metrics become important. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a baseball player, and maybe you played high school baseball or even college baseball. That's quite different than playing Major League Baseball.
That's right.
Which is you can bat 180, 200 in high school, but you haven't played against people that throw 100-mile-an-hour fastballs yet.
Completely different ball game.
Yeah, different ball game, as they say.
Yeah.
And it's not just talent. You don't just wake up one morning and all of a sudden you can do that. It's learning how to train, learning how to practice, learning different skills, and the same is true in business. In your $10 or $20 million business, an owner-operator can do things. A lot of them have the point of view, and this is a hurdle, a lot of them have the point of view, well, I've been in the business for 25 or 30 years. I've seen everything. No, what you've seen is a small microcosm. You've seen a $10 or $20 million business in your market.
Yeah.
And you've learned a lot. But you haven't seen a $200 million business with 10 locations
at national scale.
It's a whole different.
With investor expectations. Maybe when you were a founder, you didn't have investor expectations. You didn't close the books every month. You didn't have, maybe certain metrics to deliver on, but now you do.
Yeah, I think there's in that too, the financial side of this. There's the idea of KPIs is very. It's a little nebulous to some of the most successful entrepreneurial based businesses, right? They think because I'm running well, I don't need KPIs, right? Because in cash-based accounting businesses, their focus is hey, I got enough money in the bank. AR is important, so they don't track it as a KPI. Right. Productivity isn't important because they don't track it as a KPI. Because guess what? I got enough money in the bank. When that money in the bank dwindles, then they react and they just shift to whatever the need needs to be to get more money back into the bank, right? It's a different approach. That's the whole change of the game, right? Yeah. Now you're in a business where, you're potentially borrowing against revolvers at high interest rates when you got $4 or $5 million of AR kind of sitting out there you can go collect, right? And just teaching them the difference, it is a hurdle because they don't understand it, right? Or the hurdle of, you can't just get a gift card for, a customer every time they do something nice for you anymore. There's so much of that stuff that you're unwinding to say, look, that's not what got you to your growth. That's important, and we have to find a way to kind of change that to make it valuable again. But that's not what got you to win. What got you to win is how you present yourself in front of the customer, the value of the technician and the service they provide, and how do we scale that best practice out to a larger business. Not all these, they get so pigeonholed in these little things that they lose sight of what you're trying to build.
I fully agree. Let me give you some examples. Let's say an owner a founder has a business that's $10 or $15 million in revenue, and he's built it up over a number of years, and he's got some loyal employees. Like Gyner says, he's comfortable. He's got maybe $1 million, $1.5 million in profit at the end of the year. That's after he's paid himself a decent salary. That's after he's given the son-in-law a good job. He bought a new truck.
True.
and this is all, he's comfortable.
Right.
He doesn't track KPIs because he knows that if he needs money, he can go to his favorite customers, look at the receivables, and just make a call.
Mm-hmm. And they think of their AR as their bank account almost. Right? It's I've got money on this street. Whenever I can go out and collect it.
Yeah, and I've already bought a lake house, and I've got a nice boat at the lake, and I'm comfortable. But that's okay at a $10 and $15 million business. But when you buy 6 of those, or 7 of those, or 10 of those, and you're now across multiple states, and that owner, by the way, is not there 5 days a week anymore because he's got his big check. You have to put systems in place, and you have to put processes in place. And a good example is, Gyner's right. These folks don't typically even track DSO.
Yeah.
They don't track that. All they track is there's money in the account when I need it.
Yep.
And so what we do is we put in some key metrics, like DSO should be around 65, 70 days for a certain business. And if it's not, you got to go collect the money. And because if you don't collect the money, then somebody's got to put equity or debt into the business. And you don't want to do that after you've actually purchased the business.
And how deep do you go into the business, Rick? Like, how involved are you with the data? Are you just like sitting at the board and you're meeting every month, and the CEO's coming and presenting his numbers, and you're giving him some advice, or like you're in the trenches, connected to the different operators in the business, and you're driving operation? Like, what's the scope of your involvement typically? How does it look like?
Well, good question, because there are people who serve on boards that really just take up space. And what you want board members who are contributors, who are actually helping the business. So this starts at due diligence. Before you buy the business, you go in and you look at it and you understand how the business was built, and you talk to the owner, you find out how the business works.
As an operating partner, you're
Yes.
involved in the due diligence.
Yes, because if it's if the basement's full of snakes and there's water in it, you still might want to buy the business, but you now understand the work that's going to be involved.
Yes.
And so now so it starts at the due diligence. You evaluate the systems, and here's something that's valuable. All of these owners are clever folks. That's how they built these businesses. They're resourceful people. One thing we like to do is we like to engage them and say, what do you think are the 2 or 3 things that you do really well in this business? And they'll know quite quickly. You can also ask them, what are the things if you had the money and if you had the help, what are the things you'd fix in this business? And they know that too.
Yeah.
And maybe they didn't put the money in. For example, if a new accounting system costs $500,000 or $1 million, then somebody who's got a $10 or $15 million business doesn't want to spend that money. But when you scale that business to something much larger, you have to have a system like that. You have to make that investment. A private individual won't do that. They'll trust their bookkeeper that they've had for 20 years. Even if that's not being done efficiently, they'll trust them because it's proven to be good for them. So absolutely got to get in, get your hands wet. But you've also got to build a relationship with this owner, this founder, so they share those things with you. Because one of the beautiful things going forward is, one of the things we like to do is we like to get the owners, the founders that we've bought businesses from, get them together on a regular basis and say, why don't you guys just think about how to make this business better. We don't give them an agenda. We say, you tell us what we should do to make this business better. And talk amongst yourselves, figure out who's got true best practices. And this is remarkable, Yassin. When you put these individuals together, they've never really had that opportunity in their career. They might have met people at a dealer conference or a vendor exhibition or something like that, but they now are faced with similar business owners. They can see the financials. They can look at them and they can say, oh, boy, you really do a good job of that. Explain that to me. They'll come up with all of the things you should do to make the business better. And it's beneficial to them as well, because all of the boats rise when the water rises.
You reignite the entrepreneur in them that really had the business started. And Gyner, how do you manage that relationship? The operating partner is getting involved with, the founders, the people, as a CEO. Has that been a source of friction for you? Has that been source of value add? Like, what is that relationship with the operating partner like? How do you look at that, like, when you're going in so deep, as Rick is saying?
There's 2 versions of that for me, right? The version Rick just gave is a very, helpful operating partner model, right?
How common is that?
It's it's like 50-50. As Rick said, there's the board member operating partners that are not helpful. That's the second version. I call it the superhero syndrome, right? They kind of fly in. If you've watched a superhero movie, they fly in, they battle the bad guy, half the city's destroyed, and then they fly away. And then all the real people have to come in and kind of fix everything, right? Those operating partners aren't helpful, because those real people, you just left a whole bunch of work, and you're not giving me the guidance on how to prioritize the work the right way, right? And part of why I need you is because I don't have that competency yet, right? I'm not as experienced as you are. Now, that doesn't mean you should do my job for me. You should be like, hey, you might want to go build the schools first in my superhero syndrome, because they educate the kids before you go build the gym where people work out, right? It's a little bit of that, is it the right partner, or do they just come in and say, well, I was a successful CEO 20 years ago and you should just do it my way? Like, well, you're not really helping me. You're not adding value, because you're not helping understand the problem I am facing in the business today, right? And how relatable is your experience to that problem, and how do you get me the experience, resources, information I need to solve that problem, right? So, Rick gave a gray model, but I've seen the other side of that, unfortunately, which is the whole, hey, I'll just tell you from afar how to go fix it, because all my wonderful years of experience, because I'm a philosopher, should help you run your business the right way. That really doesn't work either, right?
I agree with that. I think, I call it the seagull method, where the board member flies in.
Yes.
They eat your lunch, they fly away, and then they poop on you as they leave. Some of those seagull board members, they think they have a silver bullet where they just say, oh, that won't work, or that won't work, or that's wrong, and that's not helpful.
No.
That's not a helpful thing. So I think it starts with identifying the challenges of the business, identifying the goals for the business.
That's right.
So here's some examples. Maybe it's a nice business. We just want to scale it. We want to double it in size over a period of time. A good operating partner can say, well, that's not 6 months. You're not going to double your business in 6 months. You're going to, in this particular industry, doubling your business is going to take 3 or 4 years. And here's the specific things you have to do. You have to invest in salespeople. You have to attract more workers, more skilled technicians. And it's a tough labor market. Here's how you go about that. Or the challenge in the business might be not enough recurring revenue from customers. The one and done situation where you do a project, but you never get called back because your service wasn't good. Well, you can measure that in customer retention, and you can measure that in repeat business with customers.
Yeah.
If that's your challenge, there's ways to fix that. And so with the CEO and the new ownership, you look at trying to decide what are the challenges, what are the goals for the business, and then dig down and find out what in the foundation, in the basic processes, how can you fix those things?
Yeah. There's also like what I'll call there's two kinds of CEOs you're going to deal with. And the operating partner has different approaches to both, right? There's the founder who becomes the CEO, that like the support is much different than a CEO who's experienced, who comes in, who works with an operating partner. Those are like two very different kind of approaches. At least that's my view, Rick. Like if you're working with an entrepreneur who's becoming the CEO, there's a lot more, what I'll call nuts and bolts business teaching in addition to the strategy and execution, which is on the other hand, working with a more experienced CEO, you're doing a little bit more of, okay, how do we double the business? How do I get you? What resources do you need? How can I help you identify those resources to get that business to get doubled, right? And those are two very different kind of approaches.
Well, I agree with that. And like you say, there's two different kinds of operating partners. There's different kinds of CEOs. Like you say, there could be the first acquisition might have been a cornerstone acquisition where the owner was good enough to run the business while it scales. In some businesses, they bring in a CEO who supposedly has corporate big company experience. Maybe they were an executive at General Electric or something. Sometimes those people think they know everything.
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge, because they might have known how things are in an established bureaucracy like one of these global corporations. That doesn't mean they know how 10 or 15 million dollar businesses work.
Entrepreneurial.
Yeah. The biggest gap I see with those individuals, and look, I came out of a big corporation. I'll say they lack two things. One is they lack understanding that these businesses have like roles that do multiple things, right? So your accountant is your dispatcher, is your bill collector, right? They're, because they're privately held businesses, right? And there's no Sarbanes-Oxley rules where everybody's got a defined role and everybody's got to do everything specifically, and a biller is a biller and a dispatcher is a dispatcher. So they don't get that. Like, that's really hard for them to understand. The second piece for me,
assembly line approach,
I think the second piece is they lack empathy. Like, they don't understand how big this change management exercise is for these entrepreneurial businesses to build a platform with them, right? You got a ton of experience, hundreds of years of collective experience with a bunch of people in an organization that you're now trying to bolt together with other organizations with hundreds of years of experience. That takes a lot of patience and empathy to get people there, right? Rick gave a really good example earlier of, like, put them all in a room and let them drive best practice sharing. Like, that's a great idea, right? Because it helps them own the problem you're trying to solve. But sometimes Rick's right. The big guys with a lot of structure can come in there and say, here's how you should do it. And they're losing sight of, you're dealing with people who do a lot of different things every day. And you're dealing with people who have lived kind of in this bubble in this city, doing this work really well for a period of time. And there's a lot of change coming their way, and you have to empathize to that.
And who sets the governance, like the governance or the engagement? How the operating partner engages with the company. Is it the private equity creating that governance and engagement model? Is it left to the CEO and operating partner to figure it out? Like, how is that decided?
Well, my answer to that is the CEO is in charge. You can't have two masters. Now, clearly the board is made up of whoever the private equity, usually the majority of the board is the private equity people, but they appoint a CEO to run the business.
Yep.
And the operating partner reports to that CEO, period. What you don't want is you don't want any contest between who's in charge. The CEO should be in charge. Now, if they're not the right person, there's certainly a lot of history where CEOs get changed out.
Yes.
But it should be structured so that they are in charge.
Wow. So you approach it with a lot of humility, Rick. That's not what I'm hearing from Gyner, based on his examples.
No. I think Rick's right. I mean, the CEO has to have say, right? They drive the end result. They're accountable for the end result. What most CEOs lack, I'll say, so Rick, maybe you'll disagree, maybe you'll chuckle at this comment.
Please disagree, guys. Let's have a good show.
Here's the thing. Most CEOs, I'd say most CEOs that work with operating partners lack the gravitas to push back and have a constructive conversation the right way. They just lack it. They lack the grit to go to somebody with experience and say, I disagree with you, and let's figure out a solution that we can be aligned on. Instead, they either go along with it blindly because they don't want to, or they just totally shut it down. So the collaboration stops, right? And you don't want that with an operating partner. What you want is they're there to be your asset. And then, sometimes there's going to be a no, and sometimes there's going to be a yes, that's a great idea. Most of the time, it's mostly collaboration of ideas to come up with something new that didn't exist before.
I think the CEO role in these private equity-backed businesses takes a certain kind of a character. That is, if they come out of that industry and they've had a success in that industry, that's helpful. But most CEOs in these roles, unless they're serial CEOs, they are tentative. Let's put it that way. They're a little nervous because these are wealth creation roles. The private equity people that bought the businesses, that are funding the businesses, are giving you a chance to do well. But a lot of these people don't want to rock the boat very much. They don't want to, like Gyner says, they don't want to have a debate with the operating partner, especially if the operating partner was brought in by the private equity people.
Yeah.
And now there are certain CEOs that are bold enough, confident enough that they will have that debate, and they're confident enough in their own ability and their own career that they'll have the debate. That's actually better. It's better to have that open dialogue, compare ideas, because as an operating partner, if I can't convince somebody that my approach is better based on everything I know, then I should listen. I should listen to what somebody else has to say. I shouldn't be so rigid as to say my way is the only way, because everybody's got different experiences. I think, but it's a challenge. It's a delicate challenge, and it has to be. You have to work together. Clearly, can't be any kind of a hidden agenda. Can't be any kind of a backdoor. For example, you can't come in with a hidden agenda that says, if this CEO doesn't work out, you get to step in as CEO. That's a bad agenda. Yes. And some investors will try that. They have questions on the CEO. So what they do is they bring in an operating partner who just happens to have CEO experience and a lot of background in that industry to help. That's a bad agenda, because it almost always ends up bad for the current CEO.
Yeah, I agree. And you want, the CEO has to have confidence in the decisions that they're making, right? And when they build trust with the operating partner, then they also are willing to make the phone call when they really have a problem that they need help with, right? And you want them to make that phone call, right?
That's right.
You don't want them to struggle, because struggling only hurts the PE, it hurts the people in the business, it hurts everybody, right? So to me, it's like, you know what? I'm stuck on this technology issue. I know we need to do something with it. I just don't know what something is, right? Yeah. And you have the conversation with them about something like that. And maybe they have the answer. Actually, sometimes they don't either, but they'll say, hey, you know what? I have a network of people I can reach out to and introduce you to that can help you get that answer, right? And that's where what's amazing to me, Rick, is how people don't view the operating partner. Like, you're being paid to be a service to help the business succeed, right? And that, that need, that succession need, like, always gets lost somewhere in there, right? It's like, hey, don't forget, Rick's here to help us. He's getting paid to help us. Like, don't lose sight of that message, right? And I don't know, I feel more comfortable with Yassin just because I also have a little bit of a mindset of being a lifelong learner, right? It's like learn from people who can teach you something that you might not know, right? And be open to learning like that. It's no different than if I'm the CEO and the CFO who works for me. I'm not as good, like, I'm good at accounting and finance, but I am not a CFO, right? And to me, the operating partner is no different. I am really good at being the CEO, but there are things I will acknowledge that I know or don't know of that are happening now or will happen in the future that I have to be willing to acknowledge so that I can move the business forward, right? And that's why operating partners are there as a resource for you. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Let me say this. This is going in a very positive direction. I was thinking maybe there's going to be a lot more, differing opinions, but I'm glad, right? The mindset of collaboration, the mindset of learning, clear accountability and respect and humility. Really, seems like what really, a lot of boardrooms sometimes are missing. But Rick, I mean, you've seen a fair share of due diligence surprises. So, any more stories where an owner's perception didn't really match reality, or what they thought is going on, or what they maybe portrayed is going on in the business?
Oh yeah. There's lots of those. Some owners, again, here's this comfortable business that's 10 or 15 million dollars, making $1 million at the end of the year. The family members have a job. The son-in-law gets a new truck every 2 years. He works in the business. These kind of businesses are so comfortable for these owners. And by the way, when they sell to private equity and they get a big check, that just reinforces in their mind, hey, this was a finely oiled machine that I sold to you guys. Well, in due diligence, sometimes you uncover stuff that is a surprise to everybody. For example, I had a business one time. We started the due diligence on the financials, and like we talked earlier, a lot of these owners don't even track the financials. They don't require them on a monthly basis. They just have a bank account. They know there's money in there to take care of the bills. They don't track it. Well, we find out that in this one business, the owner said, "Oh, our financials are stellar. They're precise because my ex-wife is our bookkeeper, and she's been with us for 20 years, and she's great at that." Well, we start doing the due diligence, and we find out this bookkeeper has been embezzling money from the business for the last 10 years. They've embezzled $120,000, a little bit every year. And we confronted her, and she said, yeah, absolutely. You got me. I'm guilty. But he owes me for all those years of a bad marriage.
Yikes.
Holy cow. Now, so we go to the owner and we explain things, and he says, no way. I say, how would you know? You never checked the financials. You trusted her completely. And trust is a good thing. But like the Marines say, trust but verify.
That's right.
And he hadn't done that. So that's an example of a war story. Sometimes these businesses, the owner hasn't really looked under the hood. They don't know if there's oil in the tank, or oil in the engine or not. They just haven't looked.
Wow.
Other cases are there's some people who we had a case once where the salesperson was doing very well. The top salesperson was doing very well, had great rapport with customers, but we find out they had a side agreement with the customers. The customers were actually paying them as a consultant to recommend the business. So the salesman got paid twice. First, they went to the customer and said, I'm a consultant, I'll recommend a good provider. He recommends the provider he's working for, who sells a fire alarm system to that customer. And we found that in the top salesperson. And so it makes you look at their sales numbers a little different. Did they really earn that business, or without this consulting agreement, would they not have been as successful? And so, yeah, you can cover all kinds of things, but it's like some private owners have sold their businesses to private equity, and that didn't turn out for them because there was some strange behavior there. It works both ways.
Yeah, I agree with Rick. I mean, there's always hair. There's always, hair in all these deals you've seen. How long it is really the discussion, not whether or not there is. I don't think I've ever done like probably 25, 26 total acquisitions in the PE space. I don't think a single one didn't come with something, right? Like bad inventory, aging vehicles, missing vehicles, paying all the kids' cell phone bills. I mean, it's just stuff that you just go into it knowing that that's going to exist.
It's common. It's common.
So with all of this, experience and diligence in uncovering these things, then how do you measure the impact of being an operating partner? Like, are there like a specific KPIs? I mean, how do you quantify uncovering all of these things? Is there a way to quantify the impact of an operating partner on a portfolio company? Like a set of KPIs, or like how are you measured, I guess?
Right. I think it's I don't think it's a good thing to quantify and try to have a KPI, dollars recovered or problems encountered or found. How long is the hair? I don't think it's good to measure that per se. We're all on the same team. We want to make sure due diligence is done correctly. We want to make sure the business grows and becomes better. And it's a measure of how well the business is and how clean the acquisition is after you've cleaned up these things. For example, if the operating partner finds out they haven't paid payroll taxes, or as Gyner says, the trucks are old and they need to be replaced. Well, you have to find those things and fix them. And if the operating partners help with that, the business is better. But I don't think it's helpful to say operating partner found $400,000 worth of issues on this deal and $100,000 on that deal, and he's a better operating partner than somebody who didn't, because the deals are imperfect. To be, like Gyner says, they're imperfect to begin with. You just got to clean them up if you still want to buy them. And by the way, there's a point of go no go. You might find so many things where you say, I don't want to do the deal anymore. It's too messy. Certainly had those. But the best deals for me have been, quite frankly, where you talk to an owner and you say, if you're thinking about selling your business or you're trying to figure out strategy for succession, you do a little bit of evaluation and you say, you know what? You're not ready yet. Go clean up your business, clean up your financials, pay your back or your taxes. Come talk to us later when that's all straightened out. Because right now, A, we wouldn't buy the business. B, you'd never get the right money that you want for the business. So go clean it up. Those people that come back 2 or 3 years later, that's now a much better deal. Because they've cleaned it up and they know better than to try to go to market with these kind of problems. But I think the way to measure an operating partner is, have they uncovered things that are meaningful? Have they come up with solutions on how to fix them? Have they been forthright about that? Because everything has to be fully transparent. And if that's been done, then that's a good operating partner.
Yeah, I would
so
totally
effectively
agree.
adopt the it's just like the CEO is accountable for the growth and the profitability, so effectively you align your interest with the CEO's interest and the PE interest, so there's no different set of KPIs per se.
What I mean is, you can't, let's say in that example I gave you, $10 or $15 million business making 10% EBITDA, so they're making $1 million or $1.5 million. let's say you pay 6 times for that business. So you pay 6 million or 9 million for that 10 or $50 million business. You can't have a metric that says, oh, the operating partner uncovered $400,000 worth of the problem.
Exactly. Yep.
Because every deal is different. And if he uncovered 400, was there really 600? You don't know.
I look at the operating partner I guess, Rick, to me, like the question is almost like, you've been with Huron, I think you said 12 years, if I'm right. Like, they obviously have a lot of belief and conviction in the work that you do for them. Like, qualitatively, maybe why is that? Like, if they were on with us right now, what would they say about Rick? Like, Rick's great. We've done 10 deals with him, and 9 of them have been home runs, right? Like, how do you view that? Just curious more than anything.
Yeah, I've had a good run with Huron. I would say this. Here's the Huron commercial. These are the good guys. These are buy and build guys. And some private equity guys go in, all they want to do is cut the expenses, relocate the accounting to a different state, cut the salaries, jack up prices to the customers. Private equity people that do that can improve the profitability, sure, but it's not scalable, not sustainable long term. So Huron Capital is a buy and build firm that is ethical, straightforward. And the measure is, good question, Gyner, but the measure for me is how many of the original owners are still around. Because let's say you did 10 acquisitions growing a platform company. Of those owners, one of the things we do is we say, hey, we'd like you to stay around for a period of time, help us through the transition, take some role that's meaningful to the company, like maybe it's a customer service role, maybe it's a customer appreciation role, whatever, and stay with us. And by the way, here's some equity in the new company to incentivize you to share your best practices. How many of those owners stay around for 18, 24 months? That's, to me, a measure of how well the transactions are going. Did you uncover embarrassing things when you did the due diligence? And how did you handle it? Like that experience with the bookkeeper. Take the owner aside and say, hey, this is what we found. It's got to come out. How do you want to handle this? You got to have some empathy with that. You can't just show up at a board meeting and say, throw it on the desk and say, here's what we found. You have to have some empathy. So I think, have I done well for Huron? What would they say? Well, first of all, here's a private equity firm that understood they needed operating partners. Yeah. A lot of them don't. A lot of them don't think that's necessary. What some of them do is sort of halfway. They'll invite an outside director onto the board that is an operating partner, or that they has some understanding of the business, but they're not true operating partners as it's done at Huron. So how do you measure an operating partner? Are you doing good deals? Are you doing deals where the owners stay on? Do the businesses get better? The only 3 things to measure.
Beautiful. So looking forward, looking ahead, where do you see the biggest opportunities for private equity in field services? Like, being across multiple portfolio companies, with the advent of AI and, the labor issues and now tariffs and all, like, what's the next in terms of growth and value creation for the portfolio companies that you're on its board, Rick?
Well, at Huron, we like facility services for a couple of reasons. Critical equipment in existing buildings needs to be maintained. That's boilers, chillers, HVAC, the IT systems. Those need to be maintained. I mean, even after COVID, when new construction had a huge downturn and there was no new buildings being built, all the existing buildings, even if they had low occupancy, need to be maintained. So a building that went from 80% occupancy to 10, guess what? The elevators still need to work. The fire alarm system still needs to work. The chillers, the boilers, the air conditioning, all still needs to work, even though there's only 10% occupancy. So that creates an economic opportunity for facility services companies, whether it be plumbers, electricians, IT service people, fire alarm, building controls, elevator service. These are all, and they all share a common workforce shortage issue.
Yep.
So a workforce shortage throughout the skilled trades. So if you can solve that, and you can build a national organization or a regional organization by acquiring independents. And by the way, every one of those trades, there's hundreds of independents, hundreds of them. And got to sort through them, find the good ones, make them better, and get a national operation going or a regional operation. That's a sustainable business because it has high recurring, high margin revenue. And that's not about jacking up the prices to the customers. That's the difference between trying to be low bid on a construction project against 12 bidders versus some customer who likes your service, who calls you and only you because you're the preferred supplier. The margin that you get from that is much better than the competitive low margin that there is in construction business, which, by the way, 12 bidders on a construction job, the low bidder doesn't even meet the spec. And it's low margin. So hard to compete in that world.
I know why Gyner loves the facility services too and the commercial sector.
Yeah, it's what's needed. Unfortunately, the word during COVID, the word essential got misused or overused, right, in the wrong context. But these services they're essential services. Like, an elevator typically has to get certified every year within a state, and the certification process is multi-step, multi-tiered. It's a guaranteed revenue for whoever the elevator service provider for that elevator is, right? Now, you still have to keep the business that you win. That's on the service provider. So it's not like someone's handing you that elevator. Like, they can switch elevator providers. But, there is a guarantee that in order for that elevator to be used and occupied, it has to be certified. Same thing with fire alarm system, right? Same thing with ventilation systems. Sometimes, depending on the city, chiller towers, right? Those things all require, and that's like guaranteed revenue. Not your whole business, but there's a good chunk of it that's guaranteed, and it's an enabler because typically there's a multiplier as an output of that. So if you have the service, the certification of an elevator, typically the service that comes with that is almost like for every dollar of certification dollars, you get $3 or $4 of regular service work that comes with that, right? It's your anchor that kind of brings the meaningful revenue into the business. So, I mean, I love these businesses.
And private equity loves it too. So I want to close out this by maybe sharing your advice. And Rick, as an operating partner, and Gyner as a CEO to the operating partner, there's a rise of the operating partner, right, in private equity. That's financial engineering. It still brings value creation, but really, you see a lot of private equity who are investing a lot in, bringing in the right talent and deploying the right talent in their portfolio companies, and you're seeing a lot of great talent coming into the industry. So, Rick, being as an experienced operating partner, what's your one advice to someone who's just getting started in the role? What's one thing you would want to share with them? That had you were starting out right now, in the PE space as an operating partner you would want it to know?
Well, I get a lot of calls from colleagues in the industry, people I met in the industry who say, how do I leave corporate America and do what you do in private equity? And I get calls like that. And my advice is, it's not for everybody. I don't think you can be a successful operating partner unless you've actually run one of these small, privately held businesses. It's like I say, it's one thing to have a corporate job at a major corporation like General Electric or whatever. I worked in a corporate job at Siemens. Doesn't get any bigger than that. And the talent needed, the understanding needed, the empathy needed, you have to come through it from a lower level. And if you don't have that, it's going to be hard for you to develop any kind of rapport with the people that these owners of these private businesses. They've met enough corporate people. They need to meet someone who's been in their shoes. And so my advice is, it's not for everybody. If you have that background or you're willing to get that background, then it could be a good thing.
I love that. So maybe join advise a small business. Someone that a friend or someone in your area or a good business or have a relationship with a business owner. Maybe jump on their board, start advising them already before you make that leap and get a sense of it.
Be a coach, be a mentor to a private owner, independent owner like that. You're right. So some of these small businesses don't have a board. Sometimes my advice is form an advisory council. Get some people out of the industry, not a formal board, but an advisory council. So people that want to get into operating partners, do that.
I love that. So very sage advice. And Gyner, as a CEO, what would your advice be to an operating partner, a new operating partner who's just jumping into the business and that's his first private equity stint?
I think we've said a lot of it, like listen and empathize. Like those two things first and foremost, like really hear and maybe ask a lot of questions, a lot of leading questions, right? Where are they challenged? What help do they need? Like I like Rick's example from earlier in the call. I thought about what are the top 3 things that are working well? What are the top 3 things if you had access to capital you could do better, right? Go in there with kind of a partner approach versus hey, I've run businesses like yours before. Why aren't you doing this? It's like it could be apples and oranges, and you don't know that yet, right? It's a little too early. First, get in there and find out what the needs are and help guide them to fill those needs. Then you can work on the bigger stuff, right? The only other thing is I'd bolt on to what Rick said. For folks that want to become operating partners, there's also if you want, the better way to do that also is to get into private equity, run a private equity-based company, be successful at that, then move up into an operating partner role, right? Actually go through a term.
Like a CEO, operating partner CEO.
I don't want to get into roles, because different roles for different companies mean different things, right? Because you could be the COO of a $2 billion private equity platform business, and it's different than the CEO of a $50 million one, right? So titles aside, you got to get into and actually do the work once and understand what the work means and what it means to work with owner operators and integrate and challenge of scale and all of that before you go say, I'm going to go advise people on how to do it, right? Because there is a credibility factor that's necessary.
Literally walk a mile in the shoe, get in the shoe, put on the shoes. Rick, this has been a masterclass in how operating partners drive real transformation field services. Thank you for sharing your experience and your war stories with us. Gyner, as always, great insights from the CEO side of the table. And Rick, again, thank you for sharing your experience. And Gyner, it's always a pleasure hearing your insights. And to everyone tuning in, thank you for listening in. If you've got questions about operating partners or you're considering jumping into the business, or you're a CEO who's maybe not able to break through that working well with an operating partner. Feel free to leave your questions on the comments below. Rick is pretty active on LinkedIn. Make sure you connect with him. So as Gyner. And as always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode.